There was a small door that led to the attic space in my bedroom, and it became habit that I would shut the door as I walked into my bedroom a couple times a week. I didn't think anything of it. I just assumed my mom didn't close it all the way when she left it. After a while, I made the mistake of joking with her when she made a comment about me not picking up after myself. I said something like, "Every night, I have to close the attic door behind you. How about you shut it all the way when you're done?" She then informed me that she hasn't been in the attic in months. Asked my brother. Nope. Asked my father. Nope. So then I started to pay really close attention to it, making sure it was closed in the morning, checking it after school, checking after dinner. Then I would head up to bed and open. After a couple months of wondering, studying, experimenting, I thought I'd see what happens if I just don't shut it. I opened the door before school and checked it after school, still open. I checked it after dinner, still open. Before bed, still open. Now I'm laying in bed, mind going crazy with the open door across the room. So I decide to check it out. So I roll over and focus on the black space into the attic to see a face staring back at me. I bolt downstairs, wake my parents, get ridiculed by my brother, switch bedrooms with brother, and move into new house about 6 months later due to expanding household. The new physics teacher and his wife bought our house. I could have forgotten all about that event and chalked it up to me having an overactive mind. But then my senior year, I discovered how awesome our physics teacher was. Physics became my favorite class, and he was by far my favorite teacher. End of senior year, my friend and I took our VHS camcorder around town, doing mostly silly things, but then took it to my old house to see what they've done with the place. We got a very fun tour. I got to tell stories about all the projects my dad did that were still part of the house. Then the wife led us upstairs to show us the sewing room. I asked jokingly, "Notice anything strange in this room?" And her face goes blank. She asks what I mean and I try to shrug it off, but end up saying something about the attic door. She confirmed that every time she comes up to sew, the attic door is open. She then tells us that the second day of being in the house, their dog, German Shepherd, had gone into the room but would not go back downstairs. He started barking and could not be consoled, and then jumped through the window, landing on the tin roof over the porch and then running off. The dog did not come back until the next day and has not stepped foot into the hallway that leads upstairs since. I had the initial thought that I could show my parents and brother the story I had on film, but I decided to just let it be. When I was younger, my mom was dating this guy who we will call E, and after a few months, he invited my mom, me, and my brother to go with him and his son out to his lake house for the weekend. It was right on Lake Michigan, but up in a more secluded area, which was pretty awesome. Well, we got up there and won. I already felt really creeped out. It was a smaller maybe 3-story house if you count the really big attic that had the living room, dining room, and kitchen on the first floor and had 2 bedrooms on the second floor. His grandfather had helped to build the place with his dad, and then he lived there for most of his life, working as a tailor in the nearby town. We went up to the attic to get some beach toys because that's where he kept all of that stuff, so he didn't have to haul it every time he went out there. Well, when we went up to the attic, I noticed in the corner, covered in some dust and cobwebs, about 8 mannequins, some just upper torsos and some full bodies. Not too out of the ordinary considering a tailor had lived there. E's son and I slept down in the living room on the couch since there were no more beds, and near midnight, I heard one of the stairs squeak a few times. Figuring it was my mom coming to check to make sure we were asleep, I told E's son to be quiet, quickly turn the TV off and hide under the covers. After not hearing any noise for a few minutes, I looked out from under the covers and saw 3 of the mannequins moving around in the kitchen. Their body parts weren't moving, but they were sliding around the kitchen. I swore I was dreaming, but was so terribly frightened I hid back under the covers with a small yelp and then heard the dragging on the floor coming closer. So I peeked out, seeing one of them just a few feet from the couch. I hid back under the covers and shut my eyes tight, hoping it would go away. The next morning I got up and tried not to think about it, really hoping it was just a bad dream. But when we went back up to the attic to put the beach stuff back, the mannequins were in different spots and weren't covered in cobwebs anymore. Don't believe me if you don't want to, but it happened, and I've been scared shitless of mannequins ever since. I'm pretty sure I lived in a haunted house for a while. Strange things. For one, I always felt like I was being watched in my room, and if I had the door open to the hallway, I would swear I'd see someone walk by out of the corner of my eye. We had 2 cats, and sometimes they'd be in my room sleeping, and then all of a sudden, they would sit up and stare at the door, and nothing I did could move them for a long time. This happened often. One day in my bathroom, the shelf that had my sister's beauty stuff randomly lost hold of all of the items. The thing was, the shelf wasn't loose or hanging. All the stuff had to bounce out of a 2-inch high lip into the sink. One time in the middle of the night, my sister's 100-year-old dresser, which she got as a gift from our grandma, just fell over. This thing weighed a ton, and it was built like a tank. My sister said she heard the sound of someone pushing. My mom and sister used to yell at me for sneaking around the house, only I wasn't home or in my room. They said they saw a man in shadows that was about my height. One day, we also ran into the old owner, and my mom casually asked the lady if she had ever experienced anything in the house. The lady started crying and said no one believed her, but yes, she experienced a lot of stuff. I moved out around that time. I don't miss that place. I was young, 6 or 7, somewhere around there. I was sleeping in between my parents for whatever reason. I woke up and I remember the clock reading around 4 a.m. There was something standing by the window, looking out into the front yard. It looked like a man in a brown wool robe, about 6 or so. I started to stir and sat up in bed, and the thing turned and looked at me. Dear God, that face. Extremely pale white skin, lots of really pronounced wrinkles, and the face drooped like it was melting down into a really pointy chin, almost similar to a scream mask, but with all of the features of a living being. Its mouth was hanging open, and its eyes were wide, almost like it was worried or frightened. It kept its gaze on me while it moved away from the window, in front of the bed, and out the open bedroom door. The second it exited the room, the lights turned on their own, and both of my parents jumped up on either side of me, breathing heavily like they had just woken up from a nightmare. To be clear, I was fully able to move during this, so I don't think it was sleep paralysis, but I'm not sure what it could have been other than some kind of demon or really fucking ugly ghost. I've never seen it since, but I can still picture it clear as day. Several years back, I was with some friends of mine taking care of a neighbor's cat. Friend 1, call her in, was the person who was actually in charge of this, but asked me and friend 2, called A, to come with her. We didn't really understand why, but she said that the place just gave her weird vibes, and that was good enough for us to come with her. We get into the house, and it's an old place, really creaky and already kind of off, I guess, and shows us where the cat's food dish is, and she asks A to get the food from the other room, and then asks me to find the cat. I go off, looking around the house for this cat. I'm not exactly a cat person, so I really wasn't looking so much for the cat, but looking around the place. There's all the things you'd expect in an elderly lady's house, like knitting stuff, old pictures and paintings. Nothing really that out of the ordinary. By this time, A had gotten the cat food, and the two of them were waiting for me to come back with the cat. The lady had given us specific instructions about feeding the cat, making sure it was there, and stuff. I go back to the kitchen where the food dishes were and tell them that I've checked the entire first floor and upstairs, but I can't find the cat. A then asks if I've checked the basement, to which I say no, and leads us over to the basement, opens the door, and turns on the light. It already looked sketchy as hell, and I wasn't gonna go down there. I say this, and N agrees. A shrugs her shoulders and starts going down the stairs. This is when shit goes down. To this day, N and I swear we saw the same thing. People have tried to convince me it must have been something else, but I know what I saw. A's walking down the stairs, and this lady appears in the doorway. N and I are standing in. She's dressed in a long white dress and is extremely pale, and she seems to have this glow around her. She takes a step down towards A and looks back up at me and N. She brings her finger up to her lips like she's telling us to be quiet, then turns around and pushes it down the stairs. Hard. A goes flying down the stairs, screaming. N and I are frozen in place, chills going through our body. A lands at the bottom and turns around and sees the lady. The lady smiles and walks past N and I and disappears. A gets up slowly, clearly in pain. She gets up and turns around, asking if she has any bruises on her back. There were 2 dark handprints on her back. N and I nodded our heads and said we'd show her after we got the hell out of there. We're not coming in this goddamn house ever again. To this day, I have no explanation for that. And I swear we saw the same thing. When I was a kid, my brother and I would get stuck with babysitting the neighbor's kid. His name was Ben. Ben was really fond of my Lego set that I had in the corner of my room facing the window. He would play for hours, staying preoccupied, while my brother and I would play video games in the living room. So one night, when I fell asleep on the couch while babysitting, my brother came to me and said, "Ben is under your bed and shaking." I asked, "What's wrong with him?" My brother told me to follow him into the room and try to talk him back out from under the bed. I go inside to find him on the verge of tears as he was trembling profusely under my bed. I asked Ben, "What's wrong? Why are you under there?" Ben whimpered, "Him," while looking at my sliding closet. As I walked toward the bed in order to help him out, he ran. He ran all the way back over to his house and waited on his front steps until his parents got home. Now my parents were out to dinner with his, and he explained the whole story in detail to both his parents and mine. His explanation sent shivers down my spine when my brother and I left the house to meet up with his parents and find out what happened. My mom told me that Ben was playing with my Legos when he heard a slight murmur from my closet, something that resembled a faint vocalization of "come here." He said that he looked behind him and noticed the closet had a slight opening with light peering in from my lamp. He stared at the crack until he saw an eyelid open. He told us that there was a man in my closet. Ben then hid under my bed after he gave out a slight yelp, which attracted my brother's attention. My family rushes back into my house and into my room. In horror, We find my closet door rocked open and a few things missing. My window had been left open when it was previously closed, and a few things knocked over which had not been touched previously. We still don't know what force we were reckoning with after that evening. Thank God nothing more severe happened. In my childhood home, I would often hear touch typing coming from the computer downstairs early in the mornings. I didn't think much of it at first. My parents worked from home, and it wouldn't be uncommon to wake up in the morning to hear Mom typing away at the computer. One day, I got up and called out to Mom, assuming she was down there working, as I could hear typing. No answer. No one was down there at all. I was sure I heard typing. This began happening regularly. I figured I was so used to hearing typing from downstairs that I was hearing things that weren't there. So I didn't mention anything to anyone, figuring I was going a bit crazy. This happened on and off over a period of 7 months. The sound of fast typing and fast, furious clicking of a mouse as if someone was frustrated. One morning, I was eating my breakfast when I heard Mom at the top of the stairs call out to me, "You're not down there on that computer already?" I froze and ran out to her. I was amazed she had heard it too. She was convinced she could hear typing, yet no one was down there. I told her about all the times I'd been hearing it, and then my sister opened up about hearing it regularly too when no one was down there. I wasn't crazy after all. I set out to try to catch whatever was causing it, and to try to discover a rational explanation for it. I'd sprint out of my bedroom to the top of the stairs, where I was able to look down into the room to see if anyone was at the computer. No such luck. Every time I got there, it stopped. I think it went on for a couple of years, and we learned to kind of live with it as it wasn't every day. I was down there once when the ceiling light globe in the center of the room began flashing very fast, strobe-like. It then exploded, and glass went shattering all across the room. I was lucky I ran out of the room when it started happening because I was scared. You know, if I hadn't ran, I would have been hit with bits of light bulb. Around that same time, I was on the computer at home by myself when something happened that resulted in me never being alone in that room again. I felt and heard this really sharp intake of breath directly behind my right shoulder near my ear. I've never ran so fast in my life and was hesitant going in that room ever again. Prior to that, the whole typing thing had just been something weird and a bit spooky, not scary. It still makes my heart race when I think about it today. I have never really encountered anything like this before or since all those events. I don't particularly believe in ghosts either, but I'm open to the possibilities of something in which scientists don't have a proper explanation for yet. A friend of mine's house burnt to the ground when I was younger, and his family moved across the street in a house that they rented for a bit. The basement in said rented house was unfinished, so being middle schoolers, we decided we would use the basement to ride skateboards and scooters. So, after one night of skateboarding, we head upstairs to watch scary movies and pass out. Neither of his parents nor his sister was home. Went to his grandparents for the night, if I remember correctly. As we were getting close to sleep, we hear something hit the ground really hard on the concrete of the basement. So being dumb teenagers, we decide to investigate. As we open the door to the basement and peer down, we just see a skateboard floating midair. We sit and watch for a few seconds, and then it drops suddenly and very violently. Needless to say, we packed our shit up and sprinted back my house. Not much sleeping happened that night. His family moved out soon after, and we tend to avoid that house as much as possible.